Being a business owner, whether you are just starting out, a fledgling, or an experienced one who has been around the block, it can be a really lonely journey. If you are a solopreneur wearing all the hats, or an ambitious business owner wearing many, you are still the one leading your business, and it can be really tiresome seeking the answers and solutions that you need. Information overload is real, and it can be daunting in the ever changing business environment that we're now working. That's why I created this playlist where I get to talk to my go-to experts, providing you with bite-sized training, a light bulb moment, helping you navigate this crazy world of business. If we've not met before, my name is Lindsay and I can't even get my words out. I am a business coach. It's very hot today for anyone watching. Very, very hot. I'm a business coach who supports her clients basically moving from where they are to where they want to be. But I'm not here to talk about me. I am here today because I have Chris Wilson, Speak and Serve. We know who you are. How are you today, Chris?
I'm exceptionally well, Lindsay. Come on, tell the truth. You're sat in your swimming cozy, aren't you? Tell the truth.
I have to admit, I have a dress on and it's very high on my legs. Very
Steady
high.
on. We've only just started. It's a family show.
Um, yes, it is very hot. I have recorded them in when it's been this hot before, and it can be quite a challenge. But we are going to rise to that challenge. But Chris, I need to tell everyone a little bit about you. And then we're going to go back to the old you, if we may. But first, okay, so Chris, and I'm going to read this so I get this right. Right. So you are the founder of Speak and Serve. So you work with senior leaders and sales teams to enable them to create impact and influence using their spoken words, whether it be overcoming the anxiety of speaking in public or using 5 words when one would be better. Speak and Serve has a program for you. But we met and you didn't have the Speak and Serve hat on. So you've been on a bit of a journey, and I wondered if you would share that because I think it's really important for business owners out there to understand that we evolve, we change, and we can change direction.
Well, I guess I'll speak directly to the listener who could be sitting down on a Sunday night listening to this and just
Yeah.
feeling a little bit icky about Monday morning, or they've just finished working with a client and they just thought that they're a bit bereft or it just didn't quite light their fire. When you rest in that place where you're not quite congruent with the journey that you're on, I think it can become quite lonely, debilitating, and sometimes it causes you anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. I was trying to serve a community, which was people like me, men in midlife, to try to enable them to be better, whilst also working selling healthcare insurance. And I either wasn't getting the bandwidth from the men that I wanted to serve, or I just felt a little bit weird peddling something that I wasn't truly left right and center behind.
Mm.
And the longer I kept thinking about it, the more anxious it became until one day on a walk, as I just talked about with you earlier in Anglesey, I just went, right, I'm 54 years old. The span in front of me isn't getting any shorter. When is now a good not now? When is now not a good time to start?
Yeah. And it can be that realization and that light bulb moment, can't it, when we're in a place that feels really tough. I think too often people just keep going, don't they?
Yes, and sometimes you do keep going because you simply have no choice.
Yeah.
But even in those places where you're doing something perhaps 7, 8 hours a day that isn't filling your cup of joy, how else in the other 4 or 5 hours that you've got available to you can you fill your cup of joy, perhaps through volunteering, starting a side hustle? Because you can't always just jump in because you've got responsibilities, family, relatives, mortgages, and people say, "Oh, just start a side hustle. Now's the good time." We're like, "Well, all right for you to say, but actually, it can't always be done that way."
So you moved and founded Speak and Serve. Tell us a little bit more about that before we move on. Or we may move on naturally. Who knows, Chris?
Well, I've always worked as a business person selling effectively because as a business owner, we always have to sell.
Yeah.
And part of my previous role was running a telemarketing company with my business partner, and we used to book appointments for people. But the appointments sometimes would then not turn into a client, sometimes because the person who received the appointment didn't have the right skill set to convert them through whatever techniques they didn't have. And then at the same time, I was doing Toastmasters, which I do every other Wednesday. And I started to win the club area and then divisional competitions to say, oh, you're actually okay at this speaking thing. So this epiphany came to say, well, I love speaking. I really enjoy serving people. Can I combine and make a new cake with this identity called Speak and Serve? And that's how it evolved.
And there it was born. Now, one of the things I ask my guests to do, and they're sometimes work in progress, is if if you had to title it, what would we title this talk? And yours was Your Voice is Waiting to Be Heard. What did you mean by that? Which is a fabulous phrase, and you can tell I immediately slowed down and repeated it. Fabulous phrase.
Well, when you're in the pub and you're talking with your mates or you meet your partner for the first time, they ask you questions about you, what makes you you. And then you unfurl like a sail on a boat with these brilliant stories about life, of challenge, adventure, or excitement that hasn't even happened yet. And we're natural in that environment to talk
Yeah.
about it with people that either we've just met for the first time or that we trust implicitly. And yet in business, sometimes we're almost closed in, we're guarded, and we have to put this veneer up of what professional business person look like. But actually, sometimes being vulnerable, being surprising, being a little bit risky, that's really humanity in its truest form.
Yeah.
And that's what I talk about is to bring your authentic self. And that's such a cliche thing, isn't it? Your authentic self. But just be you and be happy being you. And if people don't like it, well, go and find somebody that does want to find you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use that word authentic, and then it's a bit cliche. I've been reading a lot at the moment about that word authentic and what it even means, and we're all just banding it about now, and nobody really knows what it means. But it's you, isn't it? That's what you're saying. It's the authentic you, but the most important part is you and being you and showing up as you. Do you think that the world of social media, which I have a love-hate relationship, do you think that we're being bombarded so much by what we should say, what we shouldn't do, and actually we're struggling to be our authentic selves?
Completely. And also, we have the added complication now as to what is real and what is not, because the way that video, voice replication, and video
Yeah.
replication of the human form is now so good, it's actually very difficult to work out what is hoodwinking me with a false reality and what actually is a real person talking. So I completely get it. And it is a war of attention wherever you go. And the algorithm is getting better at giving you a personalized feed for exactly what your mind is looking for. And your feed, Lindsay, will be different to my feed, even when it comes down to news, advertising, and information that you're receiving, and it's getting very good at getting our attention and drawing you in to clickbait. I just woke up, just turned my laptop on before this, and I don't know why this is coming from, but there's a little tile there on the news screen that said, "Man shoots, policeman shoots criminal point blank in head." And I'm going, on what value does that serve me as a header on an MSN news page? What kind of world are we living in that that's a headline that they're encouraging me to click on? Wow.
I do think the world has gone a little nuts. As I was ranting earlier about how I think the world's gone nuts. And don't get me on that
Well,
again.
we are 56 and 56
You
plus.
know, I think we're allowed to rant occasionally. But I so hear you, and I feel it at the moment that there seems to be more and more that is coming our way, and I think that distorts our ability to be ourselves, whether that's kind, empathic, understanding. And I think there's challenge. And then from a business perspective, how we then show up on social media or how we show up for our businesses is becoming a little bit more challenging for us because we don't know whether we need to work for the algorithm, whether we need to work for ourselves, and what's going on and what to do for the best. And I talk about this overwhelm and this weight that we carry quite a lot. But
But just on
go on.
that, Lindsay, in terms of we have this push pull as to what we should be doing by way of marketing, engagement, LinkedIn, social media. But at the base of that, from my perspective, is genuine voice engagement with your customer base. And if you look back at the last month and go, did I talk to any of my primary ABC clients in a verbal context to ask them insightful questions about where they're going and how we can walk with them together? If the answer to that is no, well, what on earth are you doing? Because these are the people that you worked so hard to attract. And now you're spending more time trying to put people back into the funnel when actually, by lack of engagement, you could be leaking them out of the bottom of the funnel that you worked so hard to put them into. So just a sense check. Are you having real life conversations with people that matter to you?
And I think that's where people find it quite challenging because it's easier for us to hide behind the keyboard. Notice I said, were you there? Because I know I have done it. It's easy, it feels easier to hide behind the keyboard than to have an actual conversation. But it's the conversations that you have that really matter in business, which leads us quite nicely, actually. And I'm going to jump because there was another key point that you wanted to get across, but I want to jump to the second point, which is we were born to communicate without written words. And yet we just keep writing, don't we? Which is exactly what we're talking about here. Why do you think we find it so much easier to write and not necessarily write well? And we're fearful of those conversations, but conversation is everything.
Well, you just nailed it. It's that word of fear.
Mm.
And if we look at us as a species still, we have a very old brain in a modern world. And if you go way, way back in time, we had three real tactics, which was to fight whatever was going to attack us, proliferate with something that was attractive to us, or
Love how you
hunt
said that.
hunt for something that we needed to survive.
Yeah.
And in that process, communication and tribal acceptance was of key imperative because if you were castigated by the tribe, you were a lone wolf and you would not survive.
Yeah.
And therefore, communication and being acceptance and people accepting you as a communicator was of vital importance. So when we lean into those conversations and we maybe are not responded, we are treated with voicemail, or somebody says, I'm really sorry, Lindsay, but actually you're not the one we want to work with. That hurts as a tribal, primeval feeling of protection. And then the ego says, oh, don't do that again because that hurt the last time you got the rejection.
Yeah.
Why didn't you type them a night message? Because then it just doesn't feel as bad when they say no.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you and I met networking. Now, one of the reasons, I love networking is because I get to talk to people. And then when I, meet them in a networking room online, or face to face, and then I go, oh, I'd really like to keep the conversation going with you, you, and you. I have a one-to-one with them and I continue the conversation. And that gives me connection. And I almost used the word connection a moment ago, but it feels to me as that's what it does when we put the pen down and we have that conversation, it creates a much deeper connection.
Well, it's because you're then interchanging neural chemicals and body chemicals that makes us human. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, or cortisol, if I'm stressing you. In a written email, that email communication could be 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days long, depending on the interchange and when I want to respond.
Yeah.
Whereas in a verbal communication, we can quickly say, hey, how are you? Not great, actually. What's going on? How can I help you? Why don't you try this? And we've just fixed or helped or served
Yeah.
because we're human and we're interchanging a verbal communication. Even better if we're face to face, you then pick up the mood, the modalities, the sensory
Yeah.
tics that you can see when a person's fidgeting or fiddling. There's so many little clues there that you can only get through the verbal or the in-person communicative word.
And of course, the challenge with a written word and hiding behind that is that you might have written it one way, it may be received another way, or they could receive it on one day and receive it exactly how you'd intended. They could be really pissed off with the whole world, which I have been recently. Have I mentioned that? Could be really pissed off with the whole world another day and read it completely different. So this conversation, this connection is so important, which brings me to
But
the
just
first.
on that
Go
point, I mean,
on.
we do that on a workshop actually. In one of the real things, we just put the sentence on the screen that says, "She said she didn't take the money," and then we ask people to read it back with different inferences. She said she didn't take the money. She said she didn't take the money. She said she didn't take the money. Suddenly, by putting an inference on three different words,
Yeah.
the sentence is immediately received in different ways. But if you type it, depending on the mood of the day, time of the month, even if it's a
Yeah.
female genre, you'll receive it based on how you are at that point in time. Even mornings to afternoons,
Yeah.
weekends, you write it one way, the person receives it in another way.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this leads us to point one that you wanted to get across, and I don't care if it does or not because I just have to read it. It says, "Your superpower is lurking. What is stopping you from putting your cape on?" What did you mean by that?
Well, I think there's a big part of all of us, which is our ego or our inner voice. And it's somebody said something to you in the past when they said, "Who do you think you are?" Or "You should," or "Imagine if." And that weighs heavy on you in terms of stopping you from being perhaps the superpower that you've got. But if you can picture it in a different way, in that I've got lived experience, you've got lived experience, and people listening have got lived experience that could prevent somebody else falling into the place where you've just climbed out of.
Yeah.
And that's the superpower cape that you've got. And sometimes living into the Yoda in you, the guide in you, you can be the hero of somebody else's story by being their guide.
I love that. And of course, I loved. I almost felt a need to rush off and find a cape for you that I could wrap round. I just wanted to pick up on something though, and this isn't really anything to do with what we're talking about, but just that we want to be able to help somebody else. We want to maybe stop them from making the same mistakes that we have, but also sometimes we have to let them make those mistakes to learn, don't we?
Mm. Yeah, and talk about that is I like to enable as opposed to help.
Oh,
A help is that I can give somebody a fish for the day and I can feed them. But actually, if I enable them to learn how to do it for themselves, then I've helped them continue to be a good version of themselves. And if I show them how to fish, but they put the wrong line in, the wrong bait in, they fish in the wrong pool, by experience and doing the reps, they'll learn how to fish quicker. So I wouldn't say it's failing, it's just making mistakes on a continuous pattern that
yeah.
then you correct as you go and then learn as you go to become the fisherman of choice, the speaker of choice, the coach of choice.
And that's really what we have to do in business, isn't it? We have to keep doing the work. And I'm struggling because I didn't want to say keep making the mistakes because, like you, I don't really believe in mistakes or failings. It's just these wonderful opportunities to learn, to discover, to evolve, isn't it?
Yeah, and the coaching space that you and I both work in, I think the coach traditionally in its context as a business coach is that you come to a screen and you go through the grow model, you ask them questions, and then you try to get them to fix their own problems with their own answers. I believe if you're working with a really congruent service-based coach, sometimes they might just say, "Hey, Lindsey, would it be okay if I just give you a couple of observations about what I've seen in the past?" And they can say, "No, I'm fine, thanks." You're like, "Okay, back up the truck." But by offering a hand into their world to say, I think I see where you keep on repeating the mistake.
Yeah.
I might just be able to pull them through quicker than them falling consistently and then to thinking, "Oh, do you know what? I can't do this. I've had enough." And then before you know it, they've actually given up on something that they were so close to succeeding on.
And I think sometimes when in the coaching space, as you say, when we give examples or we share experience, that helps with that creative thinking. Oh, okay, so they did it like that, so I could do it like this. And it almost brings them back to that space of finding their own answers, which I think is really, really powerful. But I love that about wearing the cape. Um, the last point on here, um, when have you got it wrong in communication? What did you mean? I've never got it wrong, surely. Chris, explain that point that you wanted to get across for everyone.
I'm sure you as a mum and as a wife and as a daughter, you've probably sent or received some communication, Lindsay, that have landed the wrong way, or you've taken the inference the wrong way. I'm not going to ask you to explain, but
Me? Never.
you know when you've particularly when somebody's just triggered your emotion and the email comes in, and then before you know it, you've seen the social media post like.
Yeah.
And you've responded out of that fear or flight mechanism that I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to show them what I mean and I'm going to and then before you know it you kind of look it back the next morning and go I did I actually send that, oh my goodness me, and collateral damage has now been done. So that's the context of that. When you've sent something, it's gone. Whereas if you say something and you suddenly see their body language change, the eyebrows furrow, they start scratching. They give you clues to say, this isn't landing with me, and you might need to just change the message here and repair it before we're done. And you can do that through, particularly in person, but sometimes even through voice. You can hear that it's just not working because they close themselves down, they give you stilted answers, or they're just not responding in what I would call normal human
Yeah.
positive ways.
Out of interest, Chris, when somebody works with you, um, and I know there are a number of ways that people can do that, but when somebody's working with you, I just get this feeling that it could be that they would grow more confident in their messaging. Just thinking from a business sense here, they could become more confident in their messaging, which means they will become more confident in their selling, which will put them in a fabulous position to create impact, which is, I know that is very close to your heart. Um, and I imagine, and 'cause it's not just about speaking, is it? And then you talk about that, the company's called Speak and Serve. So I'm naturally thinking, and people may be thinking, well, it must just be about speaking and speaking opportunities. But there's so much more, isn't it, when we gain the confidence to speak well and speak from a place of maybe a greater understanding.
Yes, I'm not. She's not actually one of my clients, but she's a member of our Toastmaster group, and I'll not name her specifically, but I'll call her Sheila. She came into the group 2 years ago, and the first time she had to stand up and do what's called an icebreaker table topic speech. She stood up and she couldn't put a word out. She shook like a leaf, cried like she'd just been cutting onions, and the group collectively kind of gave her an embrace, but not a physical one, because it's a safe space to try and be vulnerable. Put it into context over a period of months and weeks continually turning up, she just came second in the UK Toastmasters competition of how to evaluate somebody else's speech. But the other thing is that she calls it her butterfly effect, is that she's turned from this sort of chrysalis caterpillar into a beautiful exotic butterfly that she feels powerful about. And she now thinks that when she flaps her wings, those little tiny movements of air then become positive to other people. And that's my feeling of when you see how when people become confident in the ability to communicate their inner feelings, their inner joy, it doesn't just become power to camera, power to a situation. It becomes power to themselves because the biggest inhibitor to our own growth, I think, is our own inner voice and our own inner belief system about what right we have to be in the clothes that we walk in.
That's so very, very true. So being able to communicate more confidently has huge benefits to our businesses, but also has huge benefits to our life.
Mm.
So out of interest, Chris, I mean, predominantly we're talking to a business audience. So do you work with business owners? Could you work with people who are not in business, but might be yeah, I know you say senior leaders, but what if they weren't being employed and they just wanted to improve the way that they communicated with their family, for example?
Yes, that's all part of the interplay of one of my adages is always seek first to understand before you can be understood. Listen for listening as opposed to listening in the waiting to reply. There's all the dynamics there of communication that is interplaying into family, friends, sons, daughters. And obviously, I've done a lot of work on things like transactional analysis and behavioral techniques as to what triggers the ego and how you can try to diminish other people's ego by being more calm, talking quietly, and waiting, using pauses. There's lots of techniques that you can use that can enable communication to be more effective. But yeah, it could be a eulogy, it could be a best man speech, it could be the father of the bride, it could just be standing up in a community hall and having a complete fear of being judged and just saying, let's just crack on and let's pull it together piece by piece and give you the confidence. Because do you know what? Sorry to be so morose, but I heard this on a podcast. 18 months ago, we all knew the Queen and we were all very aware of her until I just mentioned her. For the last 18 months, you probably haven't actually thought about her that much. And that was the Queen. And yet we all suddenly get so fearful about our latest post, our latest video, the last conversation we had in a networking. Well, if we've forgotten the Queen, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but most likely people will forget about your video and your conversation because they'll be after the next conversation that's going to be waiting around the corner.
Fish and chip paper, although they don't use newspaper anymore.
I bet there are some still. They'll be typing there. We do in Whitby.
Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I knew it would be, and I knew we'd cover lots of different things. And that's why I love these to be just conversations and see where they go. Uh, If somebody would like to get hold of you, if somebody wants to connect with you, if somebody wants to find out more, what's the best place to find you?
Overarching speaktoservandsale.com or .co.uk website, then it brings you in all the social channels and podcast, YouTube. That's the one place to go. And there's a couple of resources in there that are free that you could start to get to work on straight away.
Well, I will make sure that all those links are below this video so people can easily find you and easily connect with you and start to communicate with you. Chris,
Well, one last question to you, Lindsay, and I'm throwing you under the bus here.
oh God.
From this, which part of your communication are you going to work on to try to be a little bit more inquisitive or intentional about?
Well, you said something earlier, and I did some training many, many years ago when I worked in the voluntary sector, and it was a listening skills course. And it's really stayed with me. And I hope it has paid off in networking and other things because we can very easily fall into that place of listening to speak, listening to reply, listening to help. And sometimes we just have to listen. And it has reminded me today to listen more to my children before speaking. There you go, a life one, not so much.
Happy days. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love what you do and keep on doing it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining me.